Hello, everybody. Welcome along. My word, the world of rugby does not stand still for very long. So we have called an emergency GBR breakdown pod. This is in addition to what is going to be a whopper coming out this Wednesday, because the international landscape is changing very quickly. Not only has Steve Borthwick named his first England squad, and Hask and I are going to pick the team that we think Steve may well show his hand come that first Calcutta Cup, but also, is it overshadowing? I don't know. It's certainly competing for column inches in the back pages of the newspapers. Eddie Jones. We wondered, we thought, and
you called it.
And behold.
You called it.
Well, back to Australia. Initial reaction to that?
Very exciting. I think it was always going to be on the cards. I would have been very surprised if a man with his acumen wasn't coaching at the World Cup, whether it was an assistant role, a consultant role, to leave like someone like Eddie Jones on the sidelines with the best, winning record in a World Cup as a coach ever. Mm-hmm. Why would you ever have him not involved? And I think it's unfortunate it's the detriment of Dave Rennie, but I'm very excited to see how he goes. He's a good man, and I think the tables have turned in the media already. The whole Captain Flip Flop flipping around. So we'll see. We'll see how it goes. But I'm very excited to speak to him because when you deal with someone like Eddie, and I saw it firsthand, it's very isolating to be a head coach, and you've got no one to talk to, because you can't be seen to be weak in front of the players. You can't be seen to be weak in front of your assistant coach. When things don't go well, who do you turn to? He's got a fantastic wife, and very patient wife like mine is. Yeah. But I think for him it would have been disappointing to be sacked. I think it would have hurt, and we'll be interested to see what he feels about that. And also interested what it feels like to go back to Australia, because he's a very different man than he was at the start.
Right on cue. Let's bring him in. We've had a lot of fun over the years with Eddie Jones, and it's quite curious, really. It wasn't that long ago we were all dressed in white and celebrating your success, and now obviously the change has happened. Eddie, thank you so much for joining us. What a whirlwind, hey? I think it's Ferris Bueller who said, life moves pretty fast. Tell us, first of all, how quickly this has come about, how it's happened, and how excited you are about the new role.
Yeah, no, good, and good to see you, boys, and Hask particularly. Looking as sharp as ever. No, well, obviously, the England thing happened. And then I'd been talking to Australia previously about 2024. So we'd had a number of discussions about that. So that looked like it was going to happen. And then obviously got sacked by the RFU, and I got a phone call saying, would you consider starting in 2023. Then we had a fair bit of discussion and negotiation, and it wasn't until Saturday night until we agreed to do 2023, and then here we are, mate.
What was the sticking point? Was it cash, or was it sort of the direction, or was it both roles? What's taken a long time to get sort of sorted in terms of T's and C's?
Just that it's the right thing to do. Obviously taking over a team 9 months before the World Cup, you need to have the right support mechanism in place. And I needed to be ready to do it as well. Because, when you do get sacked, it does take a bit out of you. And the noises in your head probably get a little bit louder for a while. And I probably had 3 weeks at Suntory where the first week the noise was pretty loud. The second and third week the noise abated, so I was ready to go.
Tell me, can you just answer, how quickly did the phone call from the ARU come off the back of everything that happened with England?
Look, I'd just be making up a time. I can't remember. Haskell know. Like, it's a bit, when a coach gets sacked, a bit like a player when he gets told he's not going to get picked. Your eyes roll a bit, and the conversations following that you don't really hear a lot.
Was it days or weeks or?
No, I think it was in the next 10 days, mate.
Okay.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Eddie, it's great to see you. Firstly, it's always nice to meet someone who's happy to see me. And my wife's not that happy to see me, but you always are, so I appreciate that. And it's good to know that you were looking for a support system, not an indoor swimming pool to match the outdoor swimming pool in Australia. So, look, obviously, I know you for a while. You've had an incredible career in rugby, and you've done lots of amazing things. And sometimes you have left on your own accord, and obviously there's other times that people have chosen to go different ways. This in particular, happening 9 months out from a World Cup and the amount of hard work and the kind of passionate guy you are, just how big a shock was it, and how disappointing did you feel about that moment?
Look, mate, I knew it was coming. When you've been in the game a while and you just feel relationships are changing, you pick up little snippets. So whilst, it's a bit like I'm sure we've all had bad relationships or something bad happening, and you know something's going to happen, but you try to ignore it to a large degree. The drums were always beating, mate. As soon as we lost the first game of the Six Nations after the World Cup final, and people asking for your head, then you know it's going to be a tough 3 years. Like, that's the reality. So when we didn't have the results we would have liked in autumn, I thought, well, it's probably going to go close to here it goes. And it happened, and then, disappointed, but also, I don't hold any recriminations or any bad feelings towards the RFU at all. I had a great run of it. Loved the players. I love coaching players like yourself, and having the experience and privilege of being in that job. So, and I'm lucky enough to be able to move on pretty quickly now, which is also a bonus.
We'll very much talk about Australia and stuff, but did you have I think I read that you had something like 50 messages from the players you've coached, and I'd just love to know, how far and wide they came in from, and how much that meant to you in the aftermath.
Yeah, no, a lot, because the thing you do miss, you miss the players and the relationships you have with the players, and even at international level, they're not as close as they are at a club level where you're with them day to day, or at a provincial level like the Brumbies. But, you establish some good relationships, you help some players along the way. And it's nice to get those messages, particularly when they don't need to do that. Whenever they want to get selected, there's always messages flowing. When, you don't have a role in whether they get selected or not, it's a nice thing.
I don't know whether enough time has passed, but how do you reflect on the whole? You touched on the fact you had a great run of it. What have been the bits that you've enjoyed the most, and what have been the bits that you will not miss in any way, shape, or form?
Look, there's very little I didn't enjoy. I've enjoyed the relationship with the media, as difficult as it might seem sometimes. As I said, the relationship with the players are fantastic. And I think, particularly post that 2015 World Cup, coming in there after a difficult World Cup, winning a Grand Slam, going on a run of 18 wins, winning in Australia twice, not once, but twice. Some of those players now are the only players in the history of the game in England that won in Australia and won it twice. So that's quite an accomplishment. And I think I also have enjoyed since 2019 in the most sort of bizarre way that I always knew it was going to be difficult. I wanted to see how far I could go and how good a job I could do. And in the end, I didn't do a good enough job. That's the reality of it. So, but I gave it a pretty good shot, and that's all you can do.
Eddie, they always say that coaching an English national team is the hardest job to do. Obviously, I know you've become quite friendly with Gareth Southgate, and he has it pretty hard. On reflection of being England coach in comparison to the other roles, what was it like? How much of it was about coaching? How much of it was about the media? And how much of it was dealing about the clubs? And was it as tough as you would think it, or even you were surprised?
Well, I think the big thing about the coaching job, it's no different than any other job. In fact, as a group of players, I've got the greatest admiration. They're hardworking. They stick in. It's difficult for them sometimes when particularly when the media is beating. You can feel they go in themselves a little bit, and that's the task of the coach, to get more out of them at that stages. And sometimes maybe I failed to do that. The rest of it, there's a lot of hidden difficulties that are really hard to pinpoint. But you've got such intricate mix of people involved in English rugby. It's bloody fascinating, mate. And people jump from one side of the fence to the other. So it's I didn't spend a lot of time trying to work that out, and maybe in the end that was a telling factor that I'd got some people on the was supposed to be the right side of the fence on the wrong side of the road, and that's all part of being who you are, because I'm not a politician. I've never tried to be a politician, and maybe in England you need to be a better politician.
Yeah, I was going to ask whether you felt, you could have been a better politician with the media, because I always enjoyed the way you interacted with them. I saw, for example, other coaches try to do everything and they still got knifed, and it just seemed in that last kind of year period that there was a real kind of turning of the tide against you, not based on a lot of stuff, really, not based on fact. And I personally don't feel England are that far away from real success. At international level, a couple of % off is all it takes. Whereas the media like to portray it some sort of drastic thing. Would you ever change and become a politician? Do you think you should have played the game a bit more? Or are you quite happy that you did it how it was done?
Yeah, I think 62 going or 63, it's a bit hard to change, mate. But I always remember now, in retrospect, doing a dinner for a charity at the Oval, I think it was, and there was Tom Moody, 6'8", ex-Australian Test cricketer, and Mike Atherton, who's I've always admired as a commentator. And we were talking at that stage, and I remember him saying to me, he said, once you get the media to a stage, then basically you're terminal. And I think that's true in most coaching jobs, and now particularly. If you look at how life is generally, most people's concentration spans they reckon about 19 seconds now. And people want change quickly. And previously it was a football thing where coaches change quickly, but now it's becoming rugby and it's becoming contagious. And I can only see that going even further as we go along in the game, and as the need for results, because you just got to look at the sporting landscape now, how crowded it is. And so to be a predominant sport, you got to win and do really well. So there's an urgency to do well. And if you're not doing well, I think coaches are going to change over even quicker.
I've got one question as well before I pass on to Alex. You've obviously got a very forgiving wife, Haruko, who's the nicest woman in the world. Surely she must have said to you after finishing England, for Christ's sake, Eddie, can't we go by a desert island and just relax?
It was going to be cricket in the Caribbean on the beach with a pina colada. What's happened to that?
She must have the patience of a saint, or have you just gone, look, there's an indoor swimming pool, don't worry about it?
No, she's pretty good, mate. She's happy to move on to whatever we do next, which is obviously in Australia for the next period of time.
There is. Let's come on to that in just a moment. I actually spluttered into my cornflakes this morning because I was reading one of the articles in one of the broadsheets from a journalist who had a lot to say about you going, and suddenly he's now writing an article now that you've been announced as Australian head coach saying, what have the RFU done? And I was just like, Jesus, it ain't been 3 weeks and we've changed horse mid-race again. Tell me a little bit then about Australia. Why now? Where do the fires sort of sit for you, and what is the opportunity that you've identified?
Oh, well, it's almost the perfect storm. They've had a difficult 3 years, I think. And I think COVID hurt Australia really badly. I think it hurt some countries more than others, particularly that when they were isolated. And I think New Zealand even have been going through a post-COVID situation where their players had only played domestic rugby for a period of time, not travelled. So it's been a difficult time. And I just look at, what potentially could be their top 23 players. And it's a pretty fair team, And the World Cup in France, I think I've spoken about this before, but up until the quarterfinal, the pitches are going to be fast, the sun's going to be shining, and it suits an Australian style of game, and that's one thing I hope to sort of leave in Australia, that getting back to that really tough, smart Australian rugby. And there's a great opportunity to do it. And as Bob Dwyer said, he said, if you can't change your team in a week, you can't coach. So I've got six test matches. So, I want to make sure I keep my old mentor happy.
That's an absolute lifetime, given by current standards. Tell me a little bit just about the job spec as well, in terms of trying to get the Wallabies back onto the front pages of the newspapers, and certainly the headlines on the back pages, because we hear endlessly about the competition there is for rugby in that Australian sporting landscape with the AFL, the Rugby League, the cricket, even football now as well. Is that something that you are conscious of, and is that something that you're quite looking forward to?
Yeah, no, well, I think it's a job, and you got to win, mate. You know, Australians like English and like most people like winners, and to do well with the Wallabies, you got to win. And if you win and you engage the public, you've got to be a bit of a community team in Australia. You've got to get out there and mix a little bit. So having a background of club rugby definitely in Australia will help me in that I understand how important it is. And, you know, even after the last tour on the next Saturday, I went down and watched my old club Randwick play, you know, sitting in the sun at Coogee. So we've got to play good rugby. We've got to be aggressive. We've got to be smart. And we've got to play rugby that people want to watch, because there's probably it's dissimilar to the English fans in that there's probably more of a swinging community of sports fans in Australia that bounce from either rugby to football. Some will go to rugby league and some will go to AFL. And so we're going to try to capture that crowd. And if we can do that, that'll elevate us up the pyramid and we'll be doing well.
Eddie, when I interviewed you for my podcast, What a Flanker, you talked about kind of the version of a coach you were and how many lessons you've learned. When you look back at the 2003 Eddie Jones to the 2023 Eddie Jones, how much have you learned in advance from there, and what are you hoping to take on to that Australian side? Is that your bank manager calling? Is that your bank manager calling, by the way? It just goes, he's never seen such a deposit.
He's just tidying things up, mate. Yeah, well, I think it's just understanding the differences of individuals better. Like before, when I was a young coach particularly, I wanted everyone to be driven, everyone to be at it the whole time. I could never work out why people weren't like that. But, you know, the longer you coach and the longer you live, you understand that, you know, people beat to different drums, and sometimes a different drum can still be the same intent, but it's just done a different way. And you know, the generations have changed considerably. You know, we just spoke about young people. Most of them have learned how to live their life through their mobile phones. So they want things quick. They want things fast. They don't have a long concentration span. And I was just, you know, it just struck me this morning. I was reading something about how the average time someone spends on their phone on one item is 19 seconds. 19 seconds. And then you look at sport at the moment and you see these wild momentum swings, because I reckon sportsmen to a large extent haven't learned now to apply themselves for a long period of time. And you look at Test cricket, the same thing. And rugby's the same thing. Like, you can get out now 25-0 and you can get run down 26-25. You know, and that would have been like 5 years ago, that would have been something remarkable. Now people don't even blink an eyelid. So understanding those sort of things, applying that, creating a better environment for the individual. But at the same time, you still got to have that collective, mate, you know, because we play a synergetic game that's involved about everyone digging in and rolling up their sleeves.
That is a fascinating point. I've not heard anybody mention that, but that is a fascinating point. The question I wanted to ask you, we spoke to your mate David Pemberton on the day it happened. Actually, I think you texted him while we were recording, and he told the story about, I think, 2005 when you left the building last time, and it was an incredibly emotional experience. Just tell me what the emotions are like heading back. They always say never go back, but why go back? And what are the emotions like? Have all the people who said farewell to you last time left the building and it's a clean slate, or are you going to have one or two quite interesting cups of coffee on your way back in?
No, I think they're all gone, mate. I've outlasted, mate.
If they aren't, they soon will be.
That's one of the keys in life, mate. Outlast people.
But tell me what it's like going back.
Well, yeah, it's obviously your own country and that pride factor's there. And particularly, I think, you know, as you guys have mentioned, Australian rugby has struggled. So to go back and try to leave it in a better place would be something that'd mean a lot. And, you know, just old blokes that I played with, you know, the Ellers, and you get messages from those guys about how they want to get, there's that bank manager again, how they want to get Australian rugby back. So to be part of that renaissance, I think it'd be nice.
Tell me the guys now, as you doodle on your piece of paper, building a team. Who are the guys that you are excited about building the Wallabies around? Michael Hooper, etc. Who are the guys that you are really excited about working with?
Yeah, well, the key for us is getting the right balance. We've got a lot of powerful players, Australia, but it's getting the right balance in terms of just being smart enough to know when to play with power and when to attack and when to play a more strategic game. And, that's traditionally how Australia's been probably their DNA and separated them from the rest of the world. And probably we've gone down that too much attack or too much kicking. And it's just finding that right balance. So the 9s and 10s are going to be super important. You got guys like Nick White, Tate, McDermott, Jake Gordon in the 9s, and then 10s you got the two young guys, Donaldson, Edmed. I just watched Foley play for Kubota in Japan. He's doing quite well. Quaid, I saw, he's going to be fitter than ever. So you got some nice competition there, and it'll be interesting to see who comes through, mate. Because at the end of the day, players, as Hask knows, players select themselves. We don't select them. If they play well enough, they get picked.
Eddie, talking about balance, I think coaching staff is a huge area. I think one of the things I've looked at is you always always felt like you put the right people in the right job, and obviously you've had some frustrations I think in the last couple of years of finding the kind of right balance. How important is that with Australia? Have you got kind of carte blanche to go and find the right people to kind of put your plan into place?
Yeah, well, the first job is to evaluate who's there. So I need to go back, have a chat to who's there, what have they been doing, and whether their skill set will fit where we need to go. There's obviously a gap between where we are now and where we need to be. So we need to find the staff with the right skill set. There's probably another thing I've reflected on greatly is that, we play such a collective game, but we're trying to specialise the coaching, that we've got to have coaches who can do the specialist coaching within the collective. And that's probably going to be my prime criterion in selecting the right coaches, because you look at any game of rugby, that if you try to break it down to specialised, that's what you get. You get silos, and you can have a great line out but not have a great line out attack. So we've got to make sure we start with the collective and then break it down. But there's a number of good people out there, and particularly in Australia, we've always had a history of having good coaches, so I don't think we'll be short of good candidates.
Conscious of your time, so just a couple of extras. Have you messaged Steve? Have you spoken to Steve Borthwick at all? And did you keep an eye just on his squad today, or is that done and dusted and that ship's long gone?
Well, my wife had a couple of comments. A couple of her favourites have been left out.
Well, pass them on.
That's pretty important. So I might have to pick Steve up on that. I might start a Daily Mail column tomorrow, mate. Fire in.
Have you been in touch with him?
I got a lovely text from him this morning congratulating me. But we're in the run-up, and then when it got a bit sticky, we sort of lost a bit of contact, which was natural. But he'll do a fantastic job. I haven't seen his squad, but I'm sure he's done really well.
Have you sent Sir Clive Woodward an invitation to come and watch you be successful in Australia once again while he's in the retirement home, or have you not done that?
He's always welcome, mate. Always welcome.
Right. I've got one also, just last thing that's been doing the rounds. Obviously, I think your last game in Australia, that very articulate fan may have called you a fucking traitor, and you weren't having any of it. Which I know, because also people always misjudge you. They forget that you were Ramwick, you were a hooker. You weren't always the tallest bloke, but you had to make up with it, out and out violence and skill, which people always forget. So when I saw you come at him, I was like, he's gonna get fucking his eyes ripped out. As he messaged you going, "I'm so sorry, welcome back, coach. Can I please keep my tickets in the stadium?"
Well, I think he's going to be in the front seat, mate. I'll make sure he comes to the first open training session. He can be there and call out, and we'll let some of the big boys deal with him.
Lovely.
That is a brilliant marketing opportunity. The other thing, very quickly, which we should mention, is Lions as well. I mean, it's not just a World Cup in 9 months' time. Feels like 9 weeks, but you've got Lions and then a home World Cup as well. I mean, this for you, just the opportunity and the excitement and I suppose the challenge, the size of it. Is this about all your dreams come true for this stage of your career?
Yeah, well, I'm probably not looking at as far ahead as that. We got first game South Africa away in South Africa, and when you're Australia, you always play them at altitude, so the challenge of getting ready for that game. And we want to win the rugby championship. I think the way we are, we need to get some good results early. So I'm not looking too far ahead, but it's certainly potentially a golden period for Australian rugby. To have the Lions in 2025 and then the home World Cup in 2027. That's what people dream of. And you think about all the young Australian players now, what opportunity they've got to play in the World Cup in 2023, win it, and then back up, win against the Lions, and then be at a home World Cup would be a fantastic achievement.
Eddie, I'm going to give you the same question that I gave to Bill Sweeney a week ago. The scenario is you in an Australian tracksuit, Steve obviously in an England tracksuit, World Cup quarter-final, England against Australia, 16-all with a minute to go. What happens?
We'll kick a field goal, mate.
Some things don't change today.
We're going to be practicing field goals, mate.
Something you have learned from up here.
Just quickly on the Australian squad, just because I obviously haven't watched a lot of rugby. I mainly watch the international stuff as opposed to the club game, but I did look at the Australian team when they came over, and there's so many young guys with different heritage in there that look unbelievable. You must be very excited about kind of the different diversity within that squad and how exciting those players are.
Yeah, no, it's changed a lot since I've been there. The last year I had there as coaching the Reds, where we had a fair few, particularly Ireland players, and they've become even more predominant. And again, it's diversity is fantastic, and it represents how the country is at the moment, and we want the team to represent the country. But then the power of diversity is getting all that diversity together and getting it all on the same page. And it's almost like you've got to find the right environment for that power to be let go. And New Zealand for a long time found that difficult. And it wasn't until 2011 they got that balance right. So we're going to do that really quickly. And that'll come down to, sitting around, particularly with the senior players, and saying, right, what do we need to be like to be at our best? Is it this sort of influence? Is it that sort of influence? But I know one thing we want to have is that incredible fighting spirit that Australians have had. And again, we've probably lost that a little bit, so we need to get that back.
Do you have sympathy for Rennie? Given what the landscape at the moment at the top of the game is extraordinary, as the last few weeks have shown. But do you have sympathy for Dave Rennie at this point? Was it just the nature of the game?
Yeah, no, mate, it's a difficult time. He's a good rugby man, good coach. But it's not something that I was really in control of, but certainly I do feel for him personally.
Good on you. We must leave it there. I'm conscious of your time. It's been a hell of a roller coaster the last 7 years. I don't think it's going to get much quieter over the next few years to come. But Eddie, thank you so much for joining us. The best of luck, if I can say that as an Englishman to an Australian. But thank you for joining us. Thank you for all of the entertainment over the years, and go forth, Godspeed, and good luck with it all.
All right, no, thanks, boys. A good chat to you.
Good on you.
Thanks
you, Eddie.
so
much.
If you need a support coach in Australia, I need a tan.
Yeah, please do.
And I'm cheap.
Please do take him from all of us. Thanks, Eddie. All the best to you.
I heard it's very expensive, mate.
And there he goes. He has been box office, and he, by the sound of it, is going to be again. Yeah,
look, I think from that pod alone, and only 30 minutes it was in total, whatever it was just the intelligence, the way he approaches the game. That's what was always very disappointing for me, is that I think the general rugby media and the general rugby fans, they see it in such macro moments, tries, players form, players selected, results. They don't drill down to the nuances of the game, the micro parts of the game, the importance of the development, just how international game is, 2 or 3% off, you're losing games, 2 or 3% the other way you are. His point about chasing teams down, we never saw that. No. We never saw these mental scorelines.
Every week in the Premiership.
Every week.
And England, New Zealand.
Yeah, but even international games as well. Very rarely are you seeing a team get pumped. Wales got pumped 55, something by the All Blacks in the autumn. Every other game was a couple of points, mostly. England, South Africa at the end was disappointing. I think he's a great man. I think it's very sad that he's had to leave. I think it's Australia's gain. Again, I don't ever have that patriotic kind of feeling. So we're looking for his progress, be cheering on Australia when they're not playing England, and hope he does a brilliant job. I think he's, for me, again, it's amazing how the media, I always go on about them because their accountability is just nowhere. Their flip-flopping nature, they do whatever they're going to do to get clickbait to then sell papers, which you can't blame them for it. It's their job. It's a job, and I always entertain it. I do it myself. But then the fact that then equally they're then saying, well, what a mistake it was not to give him a no-compete clause and how we've missed out and what a great win record he's got. So look, you can't win. Damned if you do, damned if you don't. I just think it's a nice fairy tale. Shows that another country thinks how good he is.
Yeah.
And he's been signed up to a mental deal.
Yeah.
Well, time-wise, I don't know the cash, but knowing Eddie, he's not going out there for peanuts.
And if you are a purist, and we say this a lot, we say that the Premiership needs a strong Leicester side. In fact, the World Game needs a strong Australian side. I never thought I'd say this. I would love to see Australia win the Bledisloe back. It's been 2000, I think, 99, 2000 since they last won it. I would love to see Eddie Jones go back, do what he does, and see an Australian side that comes to the World Cup fit and firing and ready to play some shots, just not in the quarterfinal.
No, not in the quarterfinal. I thought the most telling part was the fact he's obviously gone in there and negotiated really hard and said, I need a budget to reform this. I need basically a blank canvas. Now, I was joking about Sir Clive Woodward in there. His obviously incredible success with England. If you ask all the players, apart from obviously his skill in selecting the right squad and his attention to detail, was the fact he would not accept no for an answer from the RFU. If he wanted something, he would put it in place. He would go and search other sports and put the best thing in, the best thing in, the latest technology. And they basically had a blank canvas to win that World Cup. That was his brief. I think Eddie going into it 9 months out and going, do you know what, it's an uphill climb. I'm sort of, it's a very difficult ask. But actually, he's gone in there and gone, right, I want whatever I want. From what I've said, from what reading between the lines, but that's what it sounded like. So it'll be very interesting to see. Because with resources, without resources, Eddie's good. With resources, he's brilliant. If he gets the right coaching staff behind him, and the young talent I've seen with that Australian side, they could be a massive force to be reckoned with.
When the dust settles, I hope the majority of England fans will reflect on his tenure as a very lively, slightly flammable era, 7 years or so, with enough success that it was great fun and enough storylines that it was never boring. And, I think you'd probably take that as a coach. We've had a lot worse than that.
Yeah, 100%. And I also think it's very exciting that England's left in a very good place with Steve Borthwick. Yeah. I think this is obviously not even a blow. It is an event on the rugby landscape. Yeah. It is a very funny event. Yeah. It is a, why didn't you put a no-compete clause in your contract event that you called? I've taken credit for it. I went on a Rivals podcast to promote the book because it wouldn't give me the airtime on here.
Absolute charlatan.
And I basically talked about what you said.
Oh, great. Okay.
Now, what's your credit? You saw it because you're a Norse. You looked at the draw. I don't even know when the World Cup is, where it is, but you knew all about it. And so
still making you look good. That is basically my remit. Yeah.
And so you're like the bloke that goes behind the elephants picking up the dung. You know
exactly.
But
are you the dung or the elephant?
I'm the elephant. I'm just shitting over everything and walking off.
Right.
And you're just running around with a little bucket and a spade. Right. Tins is riding me. I used to ride him. Very complicated relationship. Anyway, but I think it isn't a blow. But ultimately, Steve Borthwick is the best man to take England on now. I truly believe that.
I agree.
I've got a complete affection for Borthers. I think what's weird is I think you would have seen more of an outcry or more of a disappointment if Borthers hadn't come in. Because a lot of the players know him at Leicester. He's been fantastic. He's got a great plan.
Lots of very easy transitioning going on, actually, with Gatland sliding back into Wales, Borthers sliding back into England with his Leicester Nous and Kevin Sinfield, and Eddie not exactly sliding back in, but certainly going home to the sort of the Messiah's return.
Yes, and look,
I think everyone's sort of, we can all relax and breathe again until we start playing international rugby.
But I think the intensity or the vitriol or the disappointment, actually, they've managed it quite well because there is a little bit of fallout, but it won't be as loud as it could have been. Because imagine you'd had someone in or they'd, got utmost respect for Richard Cockrell, but imagine they couldn't have got Borthers. They had Richard Cockrell in place or somebody else had come into place as a short-term caretaker manager. It would have all been very different. I'm sure Cockers would have done a great job, but I just mean Steve Borthwick with his acumen for Leicester, his familiarity with the squad, the fact that he grew up in and was tested in the crucible of being managed by Eddie Jones and as an assistant coach to Eddie Jones, who depending on what day of the week it is, pushes you pretty hard. So I'm very excited about the way it's going. I think the landscape of rugby is in a great place. It's just built into this World Cup now.
Yeah.
Made it way more exciting.
Yeah.
The only person you've got to feel for, I think, is for Dave Rennie, because his reputation at Glasgow was incredible. He's a very, very good guy, a very, very good coach. Nobody likes to get sacked, but I'm sure he'll bounce back, because quality, sometimes results don't go your way, and it's other factors. Sometimes it just doesn't mix, and we see in football more often than not, because they change.
Yeah.
They play musical chairs every 5 minutes. One club, he's an absolute toilet at. The next one, they're winning Champions Leagues.
Either he goes into the Chiefs to complete the circle, because that's where Gatland's come from, or he slides into Leicester to complete the quadrangle.
Lovely.
He's a great man, Dave Rennie, and I don't think he'll be out of work for too long. Interesting, you were talking about the T's and C's under which Eddie Jones has gone back in at the ARU. That is the perfect opportunity to bring in the man who made the decision. And it's a very warm welcome to the ARU chairman, Hamish McLennan. Very early with you down under. Thank you for joining us. First things first, well done on getting your man. Tell us a little bit about how this came about and how quickly you had to move.
Look, I first met Eddie through Andy Marinos in November of 21. So we had a couple of conversations and kept in touch since then. And, we were always looking at what our options should be from 24 onwards, because we've got the Lions in 25 and then a home Rugby World Cup. So Eddie was always 1,000% committed to England and saw himself going through to the end of 23. And then when the RFU cut him, we couldn't believe it. And so our discussions I got on the phone to him and just said, look, what are you doing? What are you thinking you're going to do? We'd love to get you home. And it all started up in December of last year, and we completed last Sunday morning.
Why Eddie and why now?
Well, I think he's the best coach in the world by far. And so just his appreciation and understanding of grassroots in Australia and what to do with our player group is second to none. I mean, I just think he's a phenomenal talent. So at the end of the day, we just said, okay, we've got to get him. And, worked out very well for us. And we're very aligned in terms of what we think needs to happen to rugby in Australia. And he's got a phenomenal schedule in front of him. So it's going to be pretty exciting.
He said it took a little bit of time just to get the final T's and C's sorted out, the I's dotted and the T's crossed. Can you give us an indication on what that was? Is that the bigger picture of rugby in Australia? Because it's not just the Wallabies. I understand it's the Wallaroos as well. Tell us a little bit about perhaps some of the stickier points of the negotiations.
Look, it was all very good-humoured, actually, and very constructive. I mean, he's a very forensic person. He wanted to know what that entailed with the Wallaroos. The growth of the women's game is really important for us here. And again, we've got the Women's World Cup in 29, so we've got to think a bit more long-term about how we drive that game forward. So he wanted to know what was expected of him. We got alignment around what we think needs to happen with the Wallabies. What his obligations are to commercial partners and sponsors, fan engagement, all those sort of things. So what's good about it is that we set our expectations right up front, and we got agreement, and we're going to move forward. And again, I mean, he himself has probably got the best schedule in front of him of his career. So he's got this year, he's got the Women's World Cup in 25, he's got the Lions, and he's also got the Rugby World Cup in Australia in 27. And if it's all going well and we're happy for him to stick around through to 29 as well.
Wow, okay, with an option. Tell me a little bit just about the fight that rugby has in Australia at the moment. It's obviously a tough time for the game wherever you look. We've got real problems up here as well, but there's been a well-documented battle for rugby union in amongst the sporting landscape in Australia at the moment, with your AFL and your NRL and probably soccer coming up, cricket too. Tell me how much is on Eddie's shoulders to try and get, not necessarily headlines on the back pages, but to get a team that the public buys back into it in a big way, as we've seen in perhaps decades past?
Look, being harsh, I think a lot of the problems that rugby's suffering from in Australia are of its own making over a 20-year period. Having said that, I think we've got the player group there. Our pathways are still quite strong. And if you look at the immediate issues, I think we've got to look at how we can pull that team together and make them more effective. And that's where I think Eddie comes into play. It's not all going to fall on his shoulders, but he is a good promoter of the game. And I think his intimate understanding of the player group within the NRL and within rugby is second to none. And he understands those pathways in the club structure really well. So The good thing with Eddie, he'll be able to help pull it together, but we're all doing our bit to promote it. And I think rugby suffered from a lack of promotion in this market, and so that's where we need to focus it.
And he's certainly very good at that. Up here, his sound bites were the stuff of legend, and every so often one or two of them blow up. Is that something that he's got the license to do? He's got a bit of freedom to get a few sparks flying in Australian rugby?
Yeah, but look, our role is not to try and constrain him. So he's smart enough to know what he's doing. Look, I've spent a large part of my career in the media business too. So occasionally, people overstep the mark. I mean, I've been accused of doing that too, but we've had our little battles with New Zealand. So I think with Eddie, it's all by design. And if he gets a result, then I don't care.
I can see it's certainly not going to be boring down under for the next few years. Can I ask you a little bit about some of the players' reaction? We actually had Matt Gitter on the pod a couple of times, and he has spoken in the past about the fact he still quivers when he sees Eddie Jones. It's very much a headmaster sort of first-year schoolboy type relationship. What are the likes of the senior players? What have they said to you about Eddie Jones coming back?
I haven't spoken to any of them yet, and I'll be doing a ring around today, tomorrow. I understand that it's been like a lightning bolt going through the entire team and the rugby ecosystem down here too, and that's a good thing. So our boys need to develop a harder edge, and I think Eddie will bring that.
Expectations, you touched on those. I mean, has he got a list of criteria he's got to do, or is it got to be progress? Is it a short-term game through to the Rugby World Cup? What is on his expectation list?
Well, you talked about his contract up front. I mean, really, what are the expectations around some of those big events, including Bledisloe Cups? And at the end of the day, it's getting the Wallabies winning. And we really believe that we can do it. And we actually both believe that this year with our draw in France, with Eddie driving them hard, we can be contenders. I mean, time will tell how we go, but we really believe that we can give it a good shake this year. So we want to win Bledisloes, we want to win World Cups and Lions Series, and that's his task.
We've been talking up here for some time about the fact that as soon as this rumour began that it will be England-Australia in the quarterfinals. I mean, a penny for your thoughts as you have a handshake with Bill Sweeney on the morning of that game?
Well, look, I obviously think going into it we can win, and we can win anything, and we really believe that we can go all the way through to the finals. So it's going to be a salivating contest. And if you look at the world of rugby, this is just an incredible story, not only with Eddie, but with Borthwick, with the whole lot. So the world of rugby is going to be looking at these two nations.
There was an article written up here this morning, actually, as it was announced that Eddie had taken over with the Wallabies, saying he is never more dangerous than when it's personal. Have you had a little sort of insight into how personal this has become for him?
No, he actually, I think he's already moved on from England, actually, and he hasn't raised it at all, and it hasn't really figured into our conversations. But I hope he's got a massive chip on his shoulder about it, because I think that type of determination is going to be great for us.
It's been a very long time, hasn't it? Particularly since Bledisloe. I think is it 2000? I think since the last time you lifted that trophy, and it comes around
20 years.
Yeah, I mean, tell me a little bit about the dynamic between you and New Zealand rugby at the moment, the All Blacks, etc. Does it feels like it's been very much one-way traffic? How big a chip is that on your shoulder right now?
I've removed the chip for now, so it's actually good, and it's all settled down. When I started in 2020, the then chairman of NZR blew up Super Rugby, and there was no consultation, and dictated to us that in a competition that they would own and run, that we would have 3 slots. And that didn't fit in with our plan for World Cups, for our club system. And there was no negotiation. And they were pretty heavy-handed in terms of how they spoke to us. So we pushed back, and we didn't like it. Now, having said that, there's new administration, new people on the board, and they're fantastic. And so we cut a deal last year where we've got 5 teams. They've got 5 teams in a new Super Rugby provincial competition. We've got Fiji and Moana Pacifica in there. They'll pay us some money over the next 2 years to play, and then it's a 50-50 JV from 26 onwards. And we've signed that through to 2030. I only tell you all of that to say we had very constructive talks, and it's worked out well for us. So it's all balanced now.
Do you mind if I sort of pick up on that a little bit? Because we've actually been talking a lot up here about the state of the game. And I'm interested to know where your levels of optimism are on rugby in general right now, how fast you feel you are moving forward in Australia? I mean, it would appear to be in the professional area that the Wallabies are one of the victims, not sort of one of the teams that have risen. Where are your levels of optimism around the global game at the moment?
Look, it's obviously an amazing game. It's international. We sort of strategically believe that there need to be law variations and we need to speed the game up. So just conceptually, the game needs to be faster. There needs to be more ball in play time. I think with World Cups, I think the game's actually in pretty good shape. But again, there's an imbalance, I think, between the South and the North. We've said this to World Rugby. And I think there are a lot of advantages there. But again, I think the packaging and the promotion of the game are what we all need to lift. And then at its essence, what are we selling? And how do we make it more attractive for television?
And what about the pace of change? Is that happening fast enough?
Look, I'm an impatient person, but look, so I would like all things to happen more quickly. But the truth is, we've got very open channels, good dialogue. We talk regularly to the guys at World Rugby. So, I think in the next few years, it's actually, you're going to see more change and more change quickly.
In the UK, we've had real problems with player numbers, particularly out of the back of COVID. I think they've taken a real hit. Hopefully they are beginning to come back again. What are the grassroots doing in Australia?
So look, as you highlighted, it's very competitive. I mean, Sydney is the most competitive winter sports market in the world, and you've got this quirky thing called AFL, NRL, and soccer as well alongside rugby. We just need to shore up our pathways and our school system and our sort of junior club structures. But again, with better promotion, we've got a new broadcast deal that's delivering good numbers. We had the best crowds since 2013 through the English series in Australia. So we're very optimistic, but again, it just comes down to what are we selling? How do we package it up? How do we make it a bit more user friendly and make it faster?
We did speak to Eddie a little bit earlier on, and the question that James Haskell put to him was, will there be a cup of coffee between him and the bloke that called him a fucking traitor? I wondered whether you'd got his 2p on the fact that Eddie Jones is now back as head coach of the Wallabies. How much of an impact did he have?
I like the fact that Eddie stands up for himself. I mean, the guy was pretty over the limit, as I understand it. We actually know who he is, so that's really up to Eddie. It'd probably be a nice reunion. And the good thing with Eddie is that I don't think he really holds, that many grudges in life.
Too true. I'm conscious of time, and you've got a lot of media to be doing. But just from your perspective, how proud are you pleased are you? Actually, before I ask that, just a word on Dave Rennie as well, who's a great man. We obviously knew him from up here at Glasgow. How tough a decision, and how did he take that?
It was really hard, and that's one of the worst aspects of sort of the job administrators do. He was a good guy. He is a good guy, and he did the right thing by us. And he's a generous person in spirit and a nice man. It's just tough. I mean, I think the autumn tour we had was pretty horrendous, really. At the end of the day, I mean, we only just got over the line with Scotland. A come from behind win against Wales, which is pretty nail biting. I was there at the time, and then a loss to Italy as well as France and Ireland. So. At the end of the day, the board sat down and just said, who's going to give us the best chance of winning in 23? And then Eddie won on that vote. The fact that he understands intimately our club structure and our pathways was an advantage for Eddie. And he's got an incredible track record. So when he got cut by the RFU, as we said, he dropped down from heaven for us. So, we took him and felt that it's the right decision for us.
I love the imagery. And just quickly, you've got obviously Lions coming up, which will, and the whole thing with Eddie now will light the touch paper. How much are you personally looking forward to what the next few weeks, months and years holds? It should be a lot of fun.
For rugby, it's going to be amazing. And then if you throw the sevens in with the Olympics, our boys and girls are actually playing, very well at the moment. We've got a lot to look forward to.
You certainly do. Hamish, thank you very much indeed for joining. It's really good to get your views. Good luck. Hold on tight. Tin hats on. And we will watch with great fascination. Really appreciate your time. Thank you.
Great to chat. Thanks, mate.
So there he goes. And there is a bit of a deep dive into the state of Australian rugby. You just get the sense, don't you, that the confidence is already beginning to bubble, and there is nothing more dangerous than an upbeat Wallaby outfit as we head towards the Rugby World Cup. There are going to be a number of stories and chapters that are going to be a lot of fun to watch unfold over the next few weeks and months. Good luck to Eddie Jones. Gone and certainly not forgotten from English rugby, but a new dawn begins for the green and the gold. And as I said, we will watch with great interest. Thank you to Eddie and thank you to Hamish for their time. We are back tomorrow with another bumper episode. We're getting stuck into some quite meaty topics at the moment. So tomorrow we are debating the state of the European game, and we've got the great and the good joining us in terms of Ronan O'Gara. We've got Shane Horgan and Hask in studio, and fascinating as well to get the views of Lee Blackhead, of course, ex-director of rugby at Wasps, currently in charge and helping out with the Scarlets alongside Dwayne Peel there, not in charge, certainly helping out. Where are English teams in terms of Europe? Where are the Welsh regions? We've only got one in there at the moment. Lots to improve upon in European rugby right now, and we get right stuck into the detail on that. So join us tomorrow for another bumper State of the Game as far as the good, the bad and the rugby is concerned. But that is it as far as this special is concerned. Thank you to Ant D'Angelo for producing. The Good, the Bad and the Rugby is a Folding Pocket production. Back tomorrow. See you then.